I've been a low-key fan of the Doom series all the way back in my childhood because I am indeed old enough to have been a child when it first released. I first saw it at a friend of a friend's house and it was on MS-DOS and they actually had a LAN set up. I remember playing a few games with people on different terminals in different rooms. But I don't really think that it was the multiplayer side of things that really grabbed me, more the iconic imagery associated with it. From the front cover image, which has found itself aped and imitated across media ever since, to the Doom guy's face at the bottom going through the various stages of trauma and pain, to the designs of the demons that would flow towards you in unrelenting waves. The sound is iconic as well. For people who are into video games of my age, the sound of a Doom imp or a door opening is instantly identifiable. The music is probably one of the best original soundtrack that has been and ever will be, and has been remixed and covered over and over again. Personally, my first real experience of the game was with the Super Nintendo version, which I did go back and play on an emulator at some point recently, and given what Doom is and how it should control on PC, I don't know how the fuck I played through that game so many times on a SNES controller. But even on the SNES, the atmosphere was amazing, and I remember closing the curtains in my room and sitting in the darkness and progressing through the maps, jumping every time I was ambushed by some new demon slag. And as well as in my own life, the game was literally a game changer in so many others, leading the way for first-person shooters and even coining the phrase Doom clone, of which first-person shooters were referred as for so long. Such was its unassailable position at the top of the shooter throne. There came a number of sequels of the original and a reimagining of the franchise in Doom 3 that I also purchased on Xbox 360, which kind of missed the mark to my mind. And then id Software did it again as they rebooted the franchise with Doom 2016, and with that, Doom was once again back. Doom 2016 brought things back to the bloody action-packed romp that the Doom series should always be. And that was followed up by Doom Eternal in 2020, which iterated slightly on 2016's formula but continued the action-packed bloodshed that we all know and love. Now, I played through most of Doom 2016, but I didn't finish it, and I bounced off of Doom Eternal fairly early on because something else came along that I was enjoying more. So while being what I will call a soft fan of the series, in no small part by nostalgia for the originals, when Doom the Dark Ages was announced, I was interested but not particularly excited. It was going to be on Game Pass, so I was definitely going to play it. But if it wasn't, then it could have ended up being years before I would take the plunge in a Steam sale or something. But as I had already paid for it in a roundabout way, and as I had found myself pretty burned out on World of Warcraft Classic, which coincidentally this video was supposed to be about, I had taken a bit of a break to play Clair Obscura Expedition 33, and then Doom the Dark Ages came out. And what a refreshing break it turned out to be. I started in the evening of the 15th of May and then completed the game the next night in the early hours of the morning, and not once did I feel like the game was dragging in any way. To be honest, I think the game has pretty perfect pacing in terms of how it dishes out new weapons, abilities and upgrades, and even up to the last couple of levels it was still stopping to give me little tutorials on a new weapon or gameplay function. I'm going to say right up top that I enjoyed this new Doom game more than any other in the series, and whilst the Why I Love series title is a little bit of hyperbole and can sometimes extend to certain elements surrounding a game rather than the gameplay itself, like with my Avowed video, I think here the love is much more genuine and heartfelt. I did, after all, play it from start to finish in quick time. I loved the setting and I loved the way the gameplay felt. I loved the pace at which things unfolded, and I loved the delivery. I loved how long the game was, and perhaps most importantly, I loved how it made me feel. I just loved it, hence the video. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, Before I go ahead and explain in some more detail, I will just say that if you don't like the game, that is fine too. I have read some reviews and I am going to disagree with some takes and even take a few swipes at them, but these are my opinions and those are yours, and you are allowed to have them just as I am allowed to tell you why I disagree. But we'll get to that. So let's break this down. The setting. Very quickly, the idea that this is in any way set in our Dark Ages is completely blown away. And the reality is that this isn't really a Dark Age at all. These bitches have got more technology than you can shake a boomstick at. But there is a more medieval aesthetic mixed in with cyber Vikings, eldritch horror, and satanic occult chic. Whilst these themes do provide some nice backdrops and set pieces, what I enjoy most about the entire setup is the sheer ridiculous sci-fi fantasy camp of it all. Brian Blessed screaming wouldn't necessarily be out of place here. And as well as the campiness, there is the unabashedly ridiculous action. Some of the big set pieces are quite frankly ridiculous in the best kind of way. Like an over-the-top 80s action film, everything is turned up to 11. I couldn't help but chuckle every time I launched myself through the control panel of an enemy ship, only to fly through the air and drop directly onto the back of my flying cyber dragon and then fly on to the next objective. Oh, and did I mention that my dragon has rocket boosters? Because fucking of course it does. And the thing that makes all of this even better is that it takes itself 100% seriously. It's like some anime I have watched where shit gets so fucking demented, but never once does it not treat its subject matter with anything other than the most sincerest of reverence. I'm not going to do spoilers here for the story, and I won't show any footage past a certain point in the game, but there were numerous times where shit happened and I just sat here laughing with a smile on my face. With regards to gameplay, some people have moaned that it is too slow, but personally, I just didn't feel slow at all. I went back and re-downloaded Doom Eternal once I had rolled credits on Dark Ages, and it literally felt like a similar running speed. In fact, in Dark Ages you can even sprint, which feels a little faster. You have ways of getting around the environment, like how you can lock onto an enemy and then fly towards them to perform a shield bash, obliterating groups of low-level enemies into clouds of bloody mist. You don't have a double jump, but to be honest, who the fuck cares? This is a different iteration of the Doomslayer and he ain't double jumping for nothing. And when it comes to general combat, it doesn't feel slow at all as you juggle the various weapons and abilities against the different enemy types assailing you simultaneously. Some require you to throw your shield at them to make them explode, others will explode if you are using a plasma gun, and certain enemies need you to parry them to drop their shields. So I found the combat to be enjoyably sweaty as you danced between the different ways of countering foes and then putting it all together at the same time. The weapons are a variation on the usual Doom theme really, but with some nice touches. I particularly enjoyed the gun that just fires a fucking spiked ball and a chain into a demon's face. Have that on toast, you slag. You can pick up gold and then buy upgrades to your weapons, and I ended up pumping mine into the plasma rifle and increasing its rate of fire to ridiculous amounts. But there is an interesting enough assortment of weapons to keep you involved. But as I said, I did find a favourite, which was the plasma weapon, which I used to the end of the game pretty much. And there are some distinctly retro touches to the gameplay, like the sections where you fly your dragon or pilot a giant Pacific Rim style mech, which break up the moment-to-moment on-the-ground gunplay. It was a thing back in the day that you would have these little sort of on-rail sections to sort of break things up. It has just the right amount of difficulty to the puzzles you will need to solve to get yourself from one place to another, so even a dumbass like me can feel intelligent. Personally, I really like that this is a very curated experience where you are funneled towards your next objective. Apart from the odd moment where I had to scratch my head briefly to find the answer to a puzzle that was blocking my progression, the game feels like it was designed to keep you active at all times. When you are flying your dragon, for example, and taking out strategic points to progress, you will have sections where you chase a ship and try and shoot it down. And it strikes me that while you feel like you are supposed to kill the little fighter jet thing, their real purpose is to bring you to the next objective in an organic way, as they always seem to end up exactly where you need to be. The fact that this is a fairly short single-player game is also a bonus for me. Sure, there are plenty of side quests and secrets to find for the completionist, but when I play these games I like to 1. Go hell for leather on the main story quest, because I kind of feel like thematically that would be the most pressing thing on the protagonist's mind, and 2. If I don't keep on track, my mind will wander and there is a chance I will end up going off to play something different and then risk never coming back to it. So the length and pacing of this game is a big bonus to me, as I will likely be coming back to play through the story every now and then, just like I do for games like the OG Space Marine. I really like that they have just made a really good story-driven action game and not bent to the temptation to shove a multiplayer mode into it, and I think more devs should follow suit. I never found any of the multiplayer modes in these games particularly good compared to the purpose-developed multiplayer shooters, so I say stick to what they're good at. What I don't particularly like, and it is worth mentioning now whilst I am in the middle of dishing out praise, is the whole having to be online for a single player game and dishing out physical copies where you pretty much have to download the entire game once you get it home. That is shit. Don't do that. But it's nothing new and it ain't gonna change anytime soon, so fuck me, I guess. But the final thing I will say about my experience of playing the game, and perhaps the biggest reason I enjoyed it so much, is the way it made me feel. Doom the Dark Ages is a pure power fantasy. Everything you do makes you feel like an absolute Chad. You feel like a beast. Every movement is weighty and powerful. If you jump off a ledge, the shockwave you make when you land will instantly kill any low-level mobs in the area. In the 2016 and 2020 games, it is often mentioned that the forces of hell genuinely fear the Doomslayer, and the Dark Ages tell a story of why they were right to do so. Every cutscene and every action in the game continually reinforces why you are the ultimate weapon. You even start the game being restrained by the makers. Don't even ask, just play it for yourself to find out. As a literal weapon that needs to be kept under control. Such is your almost unlimited power and rage. I don't know whether it is the case or not, but it feels like the default difficulty the game starts at is designed in order for you to play through and feel as powerful as possible. I only died once in the whole game, and that was because I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do, and I ended up falling in some corrosive water and I let myself die so I could start that bit again. But while some people would argue that this made the game too easy, I would argue that this was the perfect experience that allowed me to fully indulge myself in the fantasy of being the Doomslayer in a time and place where he is literally at the apex of his Doomslayeriness. Not once did I feel like I was missing out from it not being harder. It felt challenging to play, but not frustrating. In short, I had a ruddy good time. And there are more difficulty levels to go through, way more, if you do want the challenge. But I do think that my personal take is that you are meant to first play the power fantasy and experience the deliciously ridiculous story, and then replay at higher difficulties for the challenge. I'm sure many will disagree, but that is my opinion and my recommendation. So as I have touched upon other people's opinion of difficulty, we may as well talk about criticism I have seen for the game. The majority of reviews I read were pretty positive, but there were a few points that I will address. One being the difficulty. I mean, sometimes I read some of these negative reviews and I have to wonder if this is some weird form of virtue signaling to your fellow gamer bros. Look at me, I am so good at games that I have turned everything up to max and it was still too easy. Well, I guess it sucks for you that you have reached the peak of human ability and games are no longer challenging for you. Maybe this game just isn't for you if it is too easy, and that's okay. I haven't played the hardest setting, but I would imagine it is pretty hard, so I don't know. There must be some god-tier gamers out there hiding amongst the populace. Maybe they should get themselves on Twitch, although that might require a likeable personality, and I might be painting with a broad brush here, but feeling the compulsion to leave one-star reviews online for a game that is perfectly fine might indicate a slight attitude problem. The second and more prevalent criticism is that this is not a Doom game. I mean, it is. It objectively is. It says it on the title. It plays a little differently to the others in the series, but Eternal played a little differently to Doom 2016. Dark Ages has many of the same types of weapons, many of the same types of enemies and puzzles, etc. It even has the same fucking fireballs in corridors that Eternal has. It has the restricted corridors that open up into battle arenas that close themselves off until you've cleared them, and it has the forward momentum mechanic of needing to keep killing your enemies to collect health and ammo. Like, I'm struggling to clearly see what people mean here. It has the branding and everything, and the lore, which some people have also moaned about it contradicting the other stories, which I do not believe it does, because it literally happened before them in the timeline, and is an explainer of why the Doom guy is such a powerful bastard. Sometimes I just wonder what these people actually want. Like, do you just want exactly the same game again and again? It does play differently to the other games, and it does have a different theme. But the differences are quite minor between all the games, and if they are that minor, then what do you actually want? Should no one try to make anything different? Maybe some people just want to moan. It is the internet after all. I thought that maybe someone would try and call it woke, and I'm surprised I didn't see that yet. Not really because anything in the game actually is woke, but because so many people's minds are utterly broken by that anti-woke nonsense that they can't not see woke in anything anymore. Whatever the fuck that means. But apparently, according to this delightful contradiction of a review I found, it doesn't have any of that woke stuff in it. I say contradictory because the first half of the review is going on about climate change and how it isn't particularly green to ship out physical copies of the game that barely has any data on them, only to make you download pretty much all of the game digitally. And I totally agree, a worthy cause in my eyes, but I would have thought that caring about the environment would fall under the giant fucking maddening umbrella of woke. So, woke enough to care about the environment, but glad there's no woke shit in the game. What a time to be alive.
Shut up, Wesley.
Maybe people mean something very specific when they use that term. I wonder what it could be. You know, under that helmet, how do you not know the Slayer is proper gay? The Doom gayer, if you will. Anyway, I'm sure someone is calling it woke somewhere, and when I find it, I will have a jolly good laugh. Perhaps I should consult the oracle of brain-damaged logic that is the woke detected games list. Always good for a laugh. My bet would be on the female character in the game being a bit too powerful for their liking. The last little point I'll talk about would be that people are griping about the music not being quite as good as the Mick Gordon soundtracks, and that is understandable. But we all know that there are disputes and disagreements between Mick and the company, so it isn't exactly surprising. But for me, the music was good enough that every now and then it just poked its head above the cacophony of thuds, slams, explosions and screams to provide a little adrenaline boost as you heard a bit of a tasty riff and some rolling double kick. So I personally am not bothered by that, and Mick's style of metal isn't really my bag anyway. I'm more of a crossover thrash guy. But I do understand what Mick's music has done for the other games and brings to the series, and he is an extremely talented and influential composer. But anyway, broadly, reviews seem pretty favourable, and I absolutely agree. All in all, Doom the Dark Ages was a fun power fantasy that was here for a good time, not a long time, and is ridiculous as it is brutal. And that's why I love it. Thanks for watching. I am halfway through writing the WoW script, but I enjoyed this game so much that I felt compelled to make a video about it. My next video will definitely be about WoW, and then will likely be followed up by my thoughts on Clair Obscura Expedition 33, or a look at my experience going back to Street Fighter 6 and fighting games in general after decades away from the genre that really started my love for video games all those years ago. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on Doom the Dark Ages down below, and I'll catch you on the next one.